our around men's mental health and part of our wellbeing series, I pretty much semi-begged Stephen to do something because I've heard him talk on more than one occasion and wanted us to benefit from that today. So if I hand over to you, Stephen, built from the ground up.
Claire, thanks very much. Appreciate you asking me along today. I must admit, I'm always very hesitant to sort of talk about my career and stuff like that because I don't feel it's been anything special. A lot of people say, "Oh, it's a great journey," and it's a good story if nothing else. So hopefully, for the next 56 minutes, you get entertained by some of my past because it has been varied. But it's also been shaped by lots of great experiences. So hopefully, we can get a chance to talk about them today. And come the end, I'm happy to address any questions, or if people want to put stuff in the chat, that's fine too. No problem at all. So Claire, if you can move on for me. So I always like to start off when talking about my career about some embarrassing photos because if nothing else, it just proves to the public that I actually had hair at one point. And when I look back through family photos, I can see what age I am by the level of hair and fringe as it reverses back the way. But yeah, I came into the water sector, I guess, really by a very, very unconventional route. And I guess one of the things that I've learned a long time ago was that there's no wrong path. When I speak to lots of people who are in a career, there's a lot of pressure on young people these days, or people in early careers, to make decisions about their future early on in their lives, when people are still finding out about themselves or what they do, what their likes and preferences are, but also what their purpose is or what their value sets are. And so that takes time to mature, and it matures at different rates in different people. And I left school at 16, 3 GCSEs, home economics, geography, and performing arts with my 3 Cs. Everything else was D's, E's, and many F's, is the way I would describe it. And I liked school. I don't think I just lacked application is probably the easiest way of describing that. And when I like turned 16, I really didn't know what to do. And I think out of desperation, I said, "Oh, do you know what? I quite fancy being a photographer." So I went to art college and did sort of photography journalism at art college. And that was at 16 years old, coming from a very working class background, going to art college, which was full of weird and wonderful people. I felt like, oh, bloody hell, I felt really out of place because I thought I was normal. And then until you go to somewhere like art college and you realize there is no normal. People walking around with coloured hair and stuff like that. At the time, it was like, God, 16 years old. And not long after, I actually left home as well. So to make my way in life. So, I felt at that point in time, I was very much in that space where, do you know what? I'm here. I just need to give it my best. And I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot about, the subject matter. And I really thought, oh, this could be a great career, but it probably wasn't for me because I didn't just lack the application, I guess, to be able to go away and do that. I loved writing. I loved taking photographs, but I would say I probably still do that now, but more as a hobby rather than as a profession. And but I learned during that time I had a lot of different jobs because I was sort of paying my own way through life at that point in time. So I started out like washing dishes, cleaning toilets, things like that, just to make a few extra pounds while I was going through college. And when I finished college, what did I go and do? Did absolutely nothing with what I'd learnt about, and went and got a job in a pub. And I was always quite a quiet boy at school, which makes people laugh now when I tell people that. But I was quite reserved, and I really found my voice. I think at that point in time, I found a natural home and a natural affinity for people, and so I didn't at that point in time think too much about what I was doing. But later on in life, I realised that that was probably the most important life lesson in my entire career was working in hospitality. I would recommend, by the way, anybody working hospitality at some point, you see people at their best and their worst. Um, and it was, I ended up actually running a pub, taking it on for myself, learned a lot of things about business at a very, very early age. But then I realized I wasn't really making any money out of this, and I was putting a lot of hours and effort in, and it's a hard place to be. But I also learned later on in life, if you can negotiate with a drunk, you can probably negotiate with just about anybody. And yeah, so when I finished that, I thought, right, you know, what do I do? I did loads of different jobs, tried to sell mobile phones. I was a DJ, I had a radio show. I set up an entertainment business. Much to Mrs. Slessor's annoyance, it's how we met. So as a DJ, so she's like, "Oh God, that doesn't make me sound very good at all." Um, and yeah, did market stalls, did all manner of bits and pieces. Used to buy stuff from auction and sell it at car boot sales. Just very sort of Del Boy-esque, or Arthur Daly-esque, as those who are old enough remember those sort of television programs. But yeah, so there's me in the middle, as a caretaker, school janitor, with my school with the uniform on, the blue jumper and the keys. And then there's me with a little less hair, with Deirdre Barlow style glasses, as a DJ. That was in a place called Duke's in Penrith in the Lake District. That was my booth. But yeah, so and I guess all the way through this, especially between the ages of 16 and 20, I learned a lot about resilience, humility, and actually about how the world works and how people are at the center of all that. So you can bash on, please, Claire. So yeah, just going back, I guess a key part of that pub work, my first leadership lesson, if you like, or the first things that I really learned that I still reflect on today is people. People are at the heart of absolutely everything we do, and I hear a lot about the AI revolution and how it will transform how we work, and I expect it to. But fundamentally, you need a human connection. And I guess running a business like the licensed trade, it taught you to read the room, and the pub's a great social leveler. People who've got different levels of income, social backgrounds can go into a pub, and it's doesn't matter to a large extent. And you can actually feel an environment where everybody felt welcome. But you also learned something around authenticity. And I think these days, sort of like my PR team sort of cringe at times because I have no filter. And so as a consequence, I think one of my former colleagues would call me authentic, which at first I thought was sort of a bit of a jibe about my direct style. But I think it was just more about that I always treat people as I find them. That what you see here is exactly what everybody sees, no matter what the situation, or whenever in a meeting, or whether I'm out in socializing. I've embraced who I am, and that's it, and actually being who you are and being your true self is really important around that. I think the other thing is managing pressure. It's working in a pub on a busy Saturday, trying to compete and move things around, and people shouting at you. It actually prepares you a lot for later on in life, and learning how to switch that out and stop it is really difficult. And especially when you're working in a business or in any kind of career where your job can soon overcome and sort of grow over you, and you can let it define yourself if you're not careful. So part of that pressure release valve is staying true to yourself, and bringing yourself back to that grounded place. And yeah, I still say to this day, I've only been as successful as I have been in this job because of my time working in the pub, because it was the time that I spent learning about people. And once you realize that, and again, emotional intelligence is something I'd never heard of till about 10 years ago. But it's probably the one thing that I wish I'd learned and knew more about when I was younger. And anybody who's starting off on their career journey now, I would advise you going and having a look, or looking for some training around understanding different parts of emotional intelligence. There's a great book called Surrounded by Idiots, which my wife bought me because she thought I'd find it funny, which I found the title funny. But it's actually a lot of sense in that book, and you'll learn more about yourself from reading it rather than the others it purports to talk about. Okay, Claire. So, how did I get into engineering and construction in the water sector? So, like when I came out of the pub and I was doing all like the DJ stuff and all the other jobs, I was a bit homeless, didn't know what to do. I needed a job that actually paid some cash. So some of the guys that used to come in the pub, they give me a job as something we called a barrier man. And that was me doing street works type stuff, going out, setting out chapter 8, bringing barriers back in, signs, cones, moving ducts and materials around. I had a green transit pickup. Yeah, and that's how I started out, right at the very bottom. And then I sort of moved through the gears a little bit. So I showed an interest in like learning how to dig holes, lay pipes. I learned how to drive excavators. I learned how to use different plant equipment. And I moved through that pretty quickly, and I enjoyed it. I mean, it was hard work, but I had a bit of an epiphany at a place called Barrow in Furness, about 4 meters in a trench, where I realised that is this really what I want to do with the rest of my life? I really liked construction and engineering because I thought the people were really good and there was a lot of characters and you could have a laugh and a giggle while doing a really important job. And I thought, right, okay, quite like this construction game. What will I do? So I looked around the site, thought, who's got the best job? I thought, oh, that'll be the QS. He rocks up once a week, drives a nice car, has the biscuits, and buggers off about 3:30. So I thought, oh, that's exactly what I need in my life. So I thought, and I didn't even know what QS, didn't even know what QS stood for, to be honest with you. But at the time, I was like, oh yeah, that looks like a great life. And so yeah, I managed to get a trainee QS position with a company called Bethel, which are sort of based in near Manchester, but they were working in the Lake District where I'm from originally. And yeah, they sort of helped me get my path, foot my path. I knew a lot about measurement and about the job because I'd done the job. And then I went into a company called what we're called Harbour in General, Volkersteven these days, as like an assistant QS. And yeah, they put me through my degree on day release. And if you can click on. Yeah, so they did put me through day release, took me into, I went to the University of Central Lancashire, which is in Preston. And I think what I learnt really in that was all about reinforcing what I was actually doing out in the day job. So day release really suited me, but I wasn't like I was 27 when I started that, and I'm 49 now. So it's that 22 years ago I graduated. No, that's longer. 19 years. I graduated when I turned 30. That was right. So 19 years ago. And so if you look back to that previous picture of me digging a hole on the A6 at Sharp, that will have probably been about, I don't know, 26 years ago or something like that, 27 years ago. So, a lot can change in a short period of time. And I really liked working with Volkersteven. They really looked after me. They helped me develop. They gave me some really, really good mentors. And I really enjoyed my time there. But then, life gets in the way a little bit. So I was turning 30. I already had one daughter, Holly, who's now 21. She's actually in Perth, Western Australia now. And me and my wife were getting married the following year. And then, the first sort of real challenge around mental health for me kicked in. And I guess at the time I didn't realize it was a mental health issue, but, my son died not long after he was born. And so that places a huge, huge pressure on your work, on your life, on everything around you. And I guess as a man, you feel like you need to be on top of everything. You need to be front and center. You need to be protecting your partner. You need to be, the stiff upper lip and resilience. And you know what? I think for the 2 weeks I was on bereavement leave, which is all I was allowed to take, was 2 weeks, and I came back to work having been through that. And there's no more humbling experience in your life where you're standing at the edge of a cemetery and a grave, lowering your own child into the bottom of it. It gives you a real sense of perspective on the rest of your life. And from that moment forward, I've always been very, very pragmatic about people and life, and you never know what's going on behind somebody's door, behind their screen, behind their face. And my only one thing I always say is be kind. Be kind to people. That shouldn't stop you from being successful or being effective. By being kind to people, it costs nothing, kindness. And I'm pretty comfortable about talking about my experiences because hopefully other people can learn from that. And I'm now in a privileged position where I'm able to influence businesses' policy to allow people to have, longer bereavement leave, have better opportunities to access counselling and help. I came back to work after 2 weeks and didn't know what had happened. I was trying to pick up as if where I'd left off. And but because of that, me and my wife, we needed to change. So that's why we moved to Scotland. And I started with Galliford Try. So in Scotland, the Traders Morrison Construction, and I started with them as a quantity surveyor, and we just needed a new place to rebuild effectively. And so my wife's a native Glaswegian, and so we moved up to Scotland, where we still live today, and rebuilt, literally from the ground up to Coir Phrase. We had a really, really traumatic couple of years where, we went through miscarriage twice and, had more difficulties trying to figure things out. You have lots of challenges around how James died and things like that. And then, my second daughter, my middle child, Maria, was born. Then my third daughter, my fourth child, Sophia, was born. And you rebuild your life, and James is still a part of us. We still celebrate life events, but it has a lasting impact on me, and a lot of the reason I am who I am is because of that. And so so please don't feel uncomfortable by me talking about it. I've made my peace with the way things occurred, but it's fundamental to understanding my journey and who I am and why the way I am. So that's why I always talk about it. And yeah, so when I started at GT, they were good enough to help me with my professional development, and I did a master's degree in construction law and dispute resolution. But all the way through, I would say my degree was a ticket to the party. It just reinforces and opens a door to give you that base education knowledge. I did well. I got a first class honours degree, but I said nobody's ever once asked me, "Oh, what was a classification degree for a job or anything else I've been to?" It wasn't important. All people were bothered about, did you have a ticket? Did you have the certificate? So if you can move on, Claire, please. So yeah, I had 18 incredible years at Galliford Try. I enjoyed near enough every single moment of it. I started with them as a quantity surveyor, and then I moved through a load of leadership roles. So that was in 2006. 2013, I made my first transition into operations, and that was a funny story, I guess, because I was working on a big sort of tender bid, doing a lot of pricing work, and I was promised the next commercial manager job that comes along is mine. And so I'm working really hard on this tender, and this sitting there one morning, this new guy comes up, sits next to me, says, "Oh, how you doing? I'm Paul. I'm the new commercial manager." So I had a bit of a complete internal meltdown. I was like raging. I thought, oh, I've been here for was it 7 years? I'd worked really hard, did everything I said they were going to do. They made me commitments. Right, you can stick your job up your backside. Is the sort of like zero filter approach. And so I said, but you know what? They looked after me. I didn't want to leave them in the lurch with this big tender, so I worked through it. I said, but that's me. I'm off. So at the end of that, I sort of decided I'm going to try and find a new job. And we had a bit of a change of leadership there. And the new guy who came in, a guy called Alan Mansfield, says, "Oh, Steve," he says, "look," he said, "have you ever thought about a career in operations?" I says, "Alan, I don't know if that's for me." I said, "I've spent the last 10 years degrading the operational colleagues, as a QS. I said, I don't know if I could betray myself." And so but you know what? I thought, why not? In for a penny, in for a pound. So I got a job as it was a contracts manager role they moved me into from a managing quantity surveyor. And I was like, I know nothing really about this. But then I probably realized I knew more than I thought I did because I'd just been doing the job for so long and you pick up on the technical side of stuff. And yeah, and so I managed to timing's a really important part of anybody's journey and career. And there was a point where the business had some challenges and it lost a few contracts, and there's a restructure. And then there were some smaller contracts, and I was all that was really left of that management team. So I ended up de facto being running a I don't know 10 million revenue framework business. And yeah, I sort of got noticed because I turned it into one of the more profitable businesses in Galliford Try, and they had some really big infrastructure projects, needed some changes. So I worked through got my first director's position in 2018. And then in 2020, I was appointed to be the UK MD of the Galliford Try's water business. And it's fair to say, I think I was a surprise pick out of the people that there might have been there. But just given my youth and lack of experience in engineering, and I think it was probably, one of these periods where businesses were realizing that, being a really good engineer, a really good technical person gets you only so far. In order to manage and lead businesses, you need the people skills that go with it to be able to make that journey. And I think that's still true today. If you can flick for me, please, Claire. So and at Galliford Try, my world was sort of like rocked within about 6 or 7 months when they decided, okay, we're going to go and grow this business. And we went through a big acquisition of a company called NMCN, or it used to be North Midland. And the company was really, really big in water. They were bigger than Galliford Try's water business. We were about 100 million. They were about 250, 260 million in revenue. We had 400 people. They had like 800 people. And it was my job to sort of like, right, bash these two businesses together, integrate them, and try and rebuild and keep the growth going and hit profit targets and hit leadership metrics all within a year. And it was like, wow. And you live and breathe these things at the time. And I was like, how did this actually happen? And I remember we did, it was through COVID as well. And so we did a transaction, and NMCN had gone into administration by that point in time. So we did a full transaction in about 2 days, all online. And I spoke to the people at NMCN on a massive Teams call for the first time, going through a COVID testing checkpoint on my car phone, because it's the only way I could join the call to speak to people. So it was just crazy, crazy times. And then within about a day, about 200 people had already resigned because they were worried about the business being administration. So they'd gone to pursue different careers, which was fair enough. So then I had to go and find, another 200 people to replace them, as well as find another 200 people to meet the growth we had planned. So, but all the way through that, I got through it really by trying to build a culture around people, and just being honest with people, trying to empower people. We have a very, very decentralized business model at RSE, and we have something which I'll talk about later, servant leadership. And, that's all about empowering. And so, and just, again, trying to stay through that purpose. I guess I only discovered my purpose recently about being in the water sector and trying to make a difference for people's lives globally around that. But finding your purpose is incredibly important, I think, because it helps you get through your career. So I had a fantastic time at Galliford Try. I have no regrets. And then I joined RSE. No, you're fine, Clay. Sorry, Basham. I joined RSE officially 18 months ago now, as their chief executive. And I guess, this is what we do at RSE around something called servant leadership. And I guess for me, our org charts are inverted. So we don't have hierarchical org charts. Ours staff inverted. So I'm at the bottom of our org charts, and my job is to serve others. So, and my senior management team are to serve others. And so I believe that people make the best decisions when they're close enough to the decision-making point. So, like all organizations, we have a governance framework, but it's more designed to enable than to prevent. And so our whole leadership philosophy is really around serving others. So our leaders exist to serve their teams, not the other way around in maybe more traditional structures. And because the people who make 90% of the decisions in this business are the closest to a customer. So the project managers, operations managers, contracts managers, they make most of the day-to-day decisions in this business. And me and the leadership team focus on the bigger picture and the strategic stuff, and giving them the support and the backing to be able to have comfort in making those decisions. And so we have a very strong approach around empowerment, around emotional intelligence, but also one of our key behaviors, if you like, how we would describe ourselves, is around entrepreneurship. and letting people take their ideas and run with them and see where they get to. And, you know, some of our best ideas for some of our products have come from people who would just do the job day in, day out and can see a way of making it better. And so we try and unlock all that through coaching. So it's definitely not command and control. It's absolutely the way around. And so this is a very unusual leadership model. And I guess I'd always sort of been doing this through my whole life. I just never called it this before. But you know, I'm lucky to work in an organization, RSE, where this is embedded, and trying to, you know, give people an opportunity to grow their careers and drive their way through. So it's just give you a sense of what we're about and what I'm about, and all the learning over the last 25 years before I got to RSE. That's sort of what it looks like. And again, it's very people focused because, you know, we're a business of 2,000 humans, and humans are not robots. You can't control them. Anyone who thinks or purports to say they can is talking through mints. And so you've got to remember that even me as the chief executive of this organization, I don't have as much power or ability as people might think to do to make decisions because of our decentralized nature. But my power comes from influence and empowering people to realize their potential, and I act as a guide. So if you think of a story, I'm like a guide through a story. Is how I would describe what I do. If you can flick on for me, please, Claire. So yeah, and I guess for me, you know, it's always been around skills. And this has never been more prevalent than ever. I saw a fantastic article in the Times the other day where they were talking about the impact of AI. And actually, you know, water treatment was one of the jobs in the top 20 roles that is AI proof for people in future careers. And I thought, you know what, that's a great message to get into people in these days around working in the water sector as being AI proof, because you know, water is life to a large extent. And so for me, as a consequence, I've always tried to say, right, what skills do you need? You know, your technical skills get you so far. So what got you here won't get you there. And that just gives you that ticket to the party, that educational background. And roles will evolve. And so we're very much around about trying to teach skills. And when I look back into my career, you know, that's what I've got the most out of. So Cywem have put a report out today where they say they need 43,000 roles to deliver AMP8 in the next 5 years. You know, where do those people come from? You know, people make career choices at 16, sorry, don't make them at 16, 17. They're making them at 12, 13. You know, and, you know, parents are really hugely influential at that point in time. And so, you know, we need to be, as a sector, we need to make sure that we're focusing on skills and purpose, not specific roles, because, you know, for many people, if I'd said to them, oh, I work in water, I maintain the water network is how I would describe my job now, 25, 26 years ago, then I would just say I dig holes and pour concrete. When you're talking to a load of aspirational young people, digging holes and pouring concrete is an incredibly vital job, but they don't always perceive it like that because their parents don't perceive it like that. And there's an obsession with people going to university. And yeah, there's an absolute place for that, but it's not the be all and end all. You can get equal status in your career by pursuing other paths and taking other routes. So for me, the four key skills that, you know, we try and teach is around leadership and management. All those things are taught around in servant leadership, making sure people have got commercial acumen. So we teach people business games. We teach them how to run a profit and loss. We teach them what the importance of cash. We teach them the importance of understanding your market, and then we teach people around the importance of communication and emotional intelligence. So these are all the things that I think are important for me and my career and moving them forward, rather than saying, oh, I had 10 years as a QS and I had a master's degree in construction law. You know, that stuff has never been important. You know, it's just something that gives you some sort of validation. If you can move on for us, please, Claire. So yeah, so my kids will kill me for having a photo of them on here. They always despair. But it's so important to remember that your job should never define who you are. You should define who you are in your own terms. And so you do, there's no getting away from it. As you develop your career and you go further along, there are challenges around getting the work-life balance. And that's not just, something I know a lot of women in the business which struggle really badly with this about, maintaining family life and careers. It's so difficult. But it's true for men as well, just in different ways. And so these are, I guess, the three top tips. And if I'm being honest with you, I need to reflect on this on a more regular basis than you care to imagine, because if you have any spare space, your work will consume it, it'll fill it up. So make sure you always set proper boundaries and protect your family time. It's like I say, work will always expand and fill that space if you let it. Make sure you keep perspective. And again, I go back to losing a child. There'll be lots of people have lots of different personal circumstances that you need. Hang on a minute. At the end of the day, life's more. Your family's what's more important. What's reflecting what's really important to you, and keep what truly matters in your focus. And fine, try and lead by example. Try and I talk about flexibility and balance and hybrid working. Keep those options open to other people and be kind. A lot of the stuff you come across in work, it's like really trivial, really, in the big scheme of things. So there'd be some things I would give you some reflections on. If I'm being honest, when I was writing this, actually I had to stop and go and do something because I realized I'd been doing too much work. I said, hang on a minute, I need to listen to what I'm actually saying. So I should never forget that because, like I say, Holly, my eldest, she's 21 now, and she's living in Perth in Western Australia and having a fabulous time working. And it's only now dawned on me that I have a daughter who is no longer at the house, and you take it for granted when they're there. You really do. Okay, we can flick on, please. So yeah, I'm now at RSE. Do you know something, right? I mean, it was a really, really hard choice for me to leave GT, and you may think, oh, surely not. But I had a massive, massive connection to the people there. So I had worked with those people for 18 years from the bottom up, and I met so many great people along the way. And I was just, it took me 9 months to make a decision to leave from having a conversation. I ebbed and flowed, ebbed and flowed, ebbed and flowed. But then I remembered my purpose, and I remembered that working in sometimes you work in an organization, you realize you're part of the furniture, and actually it's time to give somebody else a chance. And I've got this belief that in a specific role, 5 or 6 years is probably enough for me. I've added as much value as I can, and you end up becoming a blocker, and it doesn't matter how far you move in your career, you end up being part of a problem or an issue or a way of doing working that needs to change. And so I think 5 or 6 years in a role at any one point in time is enough. But it also helps you move your career. You've got to keep moving forward. You've got to keep growing. And that doesn't always mean going that way. It can sometimes mean going that way, that way, that way, that way, and that way. It doesn't really matter. This is about you. It's your career. It's your life. It's up to you to decide. It's not up to other people to tell you what good looks like. So yeah, super excited to be at RSE. It's like I say, it's not every day you get a chance to build a global water business. So I've got a great picture of me mocked up as Blofeld from James Bond as a James Bond villain. I look like Mini-Me from Austin Powers. And I often say, anyone who knows me will say, "Oh, Steve's on his quest for global domination." And so, I often talk about that. And then, we're opening in America just now. We're doing some really exciting stuff. So I'm really enjoying that. But there's a lot to do here in the UK as well. And that's, I was really privileged to be appointed chair of British Water. It's the second time I've managed to lead a professional organisation. I was president of the Chartered Institute of Civil Engineering Surveyors through COVID, which is the professional membership institution for quantity surveyors and civil engineering. And so it's an absolute privilege to be in that position, and at a time where in the sector, there's a lot of change coming in regulation with Cunliffe and what that will look like in the future. We're in a great place to be, to be able to influence that and to be able to shape it. And then finally, I want to stay grounded. So working in RSE where I'm at the bottom of the tree instead of the top of the tree, it allows me to keep connected to the people on the shop floor, the apprentices. We had some people from IWater for a visit 9 months ago, and like they were, Mark Froggatt and Sean and a few other people were there, and they're getting the technical detail, and they're all like, excited about stuff. And it's like, I can tell you what I know about water treatment on the back of a stamp. And so I'm sitting having a brew with the apprentices or having the crack with the guys in the shop floor. And one of the people from Anglin said, "Oh," he says, "I just need to step back and say it's absolutely incredible that a chief executive of an organisation can just sit there and have a brew, and the people talk to him as if he's a normal person." And to a large extent, that's what I've always tried to do because, as the quote says in the bottom, I've always tried to be good on the way up because it's a long fall on the way back down, and people, you need to be good to people and be kind. So yeah, that's where I'm at just now. If you can move on for me, Claire. So yeah, this is the hook that Claire got me and persuaded me to do this presentation because I was not for doing it to start with, and she was like, "Yeah, you've got this quote on LinkedIn, so I'm replaying it back to you." So yeah, these are the things I think are important. So be authentic, lead with yourself, be who you are. Don't try and be somebody you're not or don't want to be. Serve others, put yourself out there and flip that hierarchy and try and empower those around you. That's what will get you success. Always stay humble. I only need to look at the photographs with my Deidre Barlow specs and my time when I had hair to realize where I came from and the challenges I've had in my life. And I say find that purpose. I when I first came into this, I just thought it was a job, but it became more than that. It became a passion. It became an opportunity to change and make the world just a little bit better place. And water, why not? I mean, bringing water to people is such a privilege and being in that space. And one of the things that really frustrates the life out of me is that the media narrative about the water sector at the moment is all about corporate level stuff. But they forget there's like, thousands and thousands of people working really hard every day so people don't get cholera, don't get E. coli. They've turned the tap on, there's water. There's a flood and there's a response. These are the and one of my missions, if you like, that I often try and do on the voices. I'm lucky to have a great voice for people who listen is to tell the stories of people in water. So we've got the IWA conference in Glasgow next year, and we was there yesterday actually doing some work around that. Really, really important to me, and is to tell the stories of the people who work in water because, some of they're absolutely fantastic, and people just don't realize and don't value water. And if there's one thing I can do in the next few years in the platforms that I have is to try and get people to value water more. And finally, be curious. Never stop learning. Always keep asking questions. Doesn't matter how silly you are, think they are. When I was learning about trade, if you like, or out on site, everybody kept talking about rubber ducks. And I thought that was something you played with in the bath. But I didn't realize it's colloquialism for a wheeled excavator. That's what they call them, a duck, rubber duck. So, there's no daft questions. For 9 months, I really had no idea why people were talking about bath toys. And I was there in ignorance. So if you can move on for us, Claire. So getting to the end, so just I guess some takeaways from me about why you might have a career and that purpose around it. Your background doesn't define your future. It's like I say, I came from a single parent family, working class background in the 70s. My father was Italian and he disappeared very early on in my life. And I was brought up with my mother and my grandparents. I had an incredible childhood, but it shaped me, allowed me to build resilience. And that experience, it doesn't matter how humble, it builds character and capability. Education opens doors, and it's never too late to invest in yourself and get new skills, but that's what it does. It opens doors. Once you walk through the door, it's up to you to realize your ambition and do the things that you want to do. I'm a massive believer in developing resilience because the tough times do teach you more than the easy ones. All the stuff I've learned has come through difficult conversations and difficult periods in my life. But once you get through them and you embrace them and you learn from them, it'll help you move forward. And you'll be wondering why you were worried about stuff in the future. For me, I'm privileged to have a leadership role, but it's not about three letters that sit after my name. It's about making people feel valued and heard and it's people that'll remember you long after you've gone. And that's why I love the Maya Angelou quote. It's about how you make people feel. And one of my favorite things is whenever I see any of my former colleagues at GT, they all talk about how they love being around us and things like that, and I think that means more to me than anything else. And then finally, get the balance right. It's not a practice, it's not a destination. You're not gonna you've got to keep on getting and changing that balance. You've got to keep refining it. It's like a precision instrument. You won't get it perfect, but you've just got to keep trying. And when I look back, the one thing that I look back, I made a lot of decisions to be at home in early in my career when I could have took jobs elsewhere. And but when my daughter left for Australia in the summer, she wrote me a lovely letter. And she just saying, look, you were there for every single life event, everything that I needed you to be there for, you were there. And I think for me, that was validation of trying to do it the right way. Don't get everything right. Anyone who says they get everything right is talking through the backside. And finally, the one quote I love and use on a regular basis is, we're here for a good time, not for a long time. So you've got to enjoy yourself because life's short and you don't know when it's going to end. Claire, I think that's one more slide. So yeah, happy to take any questions, or if you don't want to talk here, happy to connect with me on LinkedIn or reach out another way.
Thank you ever so much. It was just as good as I thought it was going to be. Thank you very
You're
much.
just trying to flatter me now, Claire.
It's really interesting you talk about servant leadership because a couple of years back I did ILM 5 and I had always put my team first and always just thought that that's how everyone did leadership because as terrible as it sounds, no one teaches you how to be a good manager particularly. They teach you health and safety rules and HR, grievance procedures and various other bits and pieces, but not how to get the very best out of your team often. And it was a real epiphany moment for me when we started talking about all the leadership styles. And I thought, yeah, that's very much how I lead, but by accident rather than design. And as soon as I started leading like that, I found that results of my team were miraculously so much better than when I tried to control every single part of my life. COVID was probably my biggest car crash from a management perspective, but my hugest learning curve because it was the one situation I couldn't control, 31 people in the field, changing priorities every single moment, and me trying to play mission control from my lounge very badly.
Do you know, I can absolutely relate to that, Claire. I guess when I did an ILM course through Galliford Try in 2012, 2013, and it was the first time I learned really about emotional intelligence and my impact and my style and others. And I was a young trainee manager almost at that point. I had like junior QSs for the first time that were reporting into us. And I had 3 or 4 people, and like 2 or 3 of them were great. Did everything I needed to do. Just got me. One of them was like, I'm just like pulling my hair out. Why will this person not listen to me? And then I did, and I learned a lot about myself during that session. And I had an epiphany, like you. It dawned on me it wasn't them who was the problem; it was me, because the way I was asking them to do things wasn't conducive to their way of learning. And so I actually took some time to understand this person was quite introverted. They had some of the challenges, but they were technically sound. Once I understood that and changed my style and approached it very, very differently, they turned out to be the best person in that team by a country mile. And I think generally you should always start with yourself before thinking of others in terms of when you've got those challenging performance conversations.
Yeah. And rarely do people come into work to fail. They come in to
Nobody,
thrive, don't they?
correct. Nobody wakes up in the morning and thinks, I'm going to be shit today. I'm going to do a bad job. Nobody thinks that. No, nobody I've met, and I've met a lot of people in my life. So I don't know anybody who does that.
Well, we have got some questions and some praise coming in the chat, so we'll have a look at that now and gives everyone else an opportunity to have a think. So, Nicola, fabulous talk, so honest and inspiring. So, well done, Stephen. And then
Thank
a
you,
question
Nicola.
from Gerald: if you had to change one thing regarding management and managing people, what would it be?
I would make sure that everybody had spent some time working in hospitality, because I see this all the time when I'm out it drives me to despair that the poor server who's trying their best, there's lots of competing priorities, who's trying to give you a good experience, and you're absolutely, usually because you've had a bad day, absolutely giving them a real pounding, or airline check-ins, or stewardesses, or stewards, absolutely the same sort of thing where, people don't understand what it's like to be on the end of people at the best and the worst. So if I could change one thing in managing people, it would be to spend some time working that space to understand the impact of your presence on others, because it's the one thing that has changed or can change your perception about how you work with people. And you will find that people are not robots. And so understanding, their nature and behaviors, and realizing you need to change as much as other people might need to change some of their behaviors, is important.
So Karen comes up next. She says, Stephen, thanks so much for sharing your life and career experiences. I wish I'd heard this talk 25 years ago. And then she's followed up with a couple of questions. So firstly, you mentioned mentors. Who made a difference in your career as a mentor?
Do you know something? I've had 2 or 3 people, I guess, that I would say have been the biggest difference to me. And neither of them, the 2 biggest ones, neither of them actually had any skin in the game and me being successful. The first one was a guy called Jack, and when I was started at Harbour in General, he was the senior QS who was assigned to try and help me. And he knew I was winging it, like, he knew I was coming from, like, the very, very bottom. But he saw something in me I didn't see in myself, and that was I always wanted to keep trying. I always just wanted to keep pushing, and I always had that spirit of entrepreneurship that allowed me to say, well, what if we did it this way? What if we did it this way? Give you an example. So when I was in the pub, I started getting cheap vodka from Liquor Save. That's how old this is. And getting some boiled sweets, rhubarb and custard, cola cubes, crushing them up, putting them in the vodka to create flavored vodkas, and then sticking them with lemonade and selling them for £2 a pop. And that it was that sort of entrepreneurial type spirit that actually ended up getting me the job with RSE, which I'll come to. But and so Jack was really important because he helped me understand, my technical deficiencies, how to address them and how to move through them, and my paranoia about coming from the tools, if you like, and not having that education that others maybe had in that peer group. And then there was a guy called Rob Bell, who was the operations director at Morrison's Galliford when I first started. He's the guy who interviewed me, and he often says to me, he says, Steve, he says, I remember the day to this, I'll never forget the day I met you for the first time in that interview. And he says, I knew then at that point in time, you had something about you that I didn't see in others. And I think it was just more that I'm quite an extroverted sort of person. So I wear my heart on my sleeve. I think when I talk. And so he was, he's just laughing, and he would say, and I didn't know at the time that I just thought he was a QS. He didn't introduce himself as the operations director. I just thought him and the other guy who interviewed me were just two old QS. Oh, this would be great. There'll be plenty of opportunities. Look at the age of these boys. I'll be in there in no time, sort of thing. And what Rab did for me was that he taught me the benefit of turning it back 1 or 2 notches. Don't lose yourself, but know when to be yourself in and when to tone it back and tone the dial down a little bit. Otherwise, I'll be a megaphone all the time. I need to turn it down a couple of notches on the volume. Move from stereo to FM, maybe. So what Rab taught me. But what these people did was allowed me the freedom to be myself and to learn from them and to make mistakes, but more importantly, learn from those mistakes and create a framework for that, I guess. So those people made a real difference. And what I've tried to do is I've tried to act the same. So I don't see myself as a mentor, I guess, but other people would always reach out and ask me for help. So if anyone ever asks me for help, I always try my best because that's what people have always done for me. So there's a lassie called Catherine who works in Morrison's. She's not supermarket, sorry, Galliford's. And she was out of college, and she would put a post out on Twitter or something like that, and I just happened been retweeted into my network looking for a job in construction, and she was finding it really tough. So I just DM'd her, said, "All right, okay, come along and see us. We're not far away from you. Come and have an interview." And next 2 weeks later, she started. She's now still working there. She's done a degree in civil engineering. She's been to college. She's got a young family herself. And, we created a framework to allow her to do that, made sure that she had the right support around her, made sure she had even when she was on maternity leave and came back and things like that. It's those kind of things, I've always tried to do. And like, I always try and help women in construction as well, because they're such an underrepresented, sector of society, and diversity is really, really important to me, because I did a pod recently with British Water on being working class, as part of that diversity piece. And so yeah, I think it's important that you try and help people wherever you can. That doesn't have to be like a formal mentoring, not mentoring, chat, but it can just be somebody there I can help you with that. What was Karen's last question?
The second question was, when you started looking for other jobs where you felt you weren't particularly the expert, what gave you the confidence and why do you think you were successful?
What gave me the confidence? I guess what gave me the confidence was never to say never. And what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst thing is somebody says no. I will be really honest with you, Karen, and I probably, what's the word I would use? Extolled the virtues of my capability perhaps more than I probably had at the time. But I guess that confidence just came about working in the pub, because it's funny, like, I'm really extroverted now, but when I was younger, I was quite introverted, because growing up in a working class northern town where you come from a single parent family in the late 70s, early 80s, and your dad was a foreigner, that makes you an easy target for a lot of people. And so I used to try and keep my head down a little bit and out the way. And when I worked in the pub, that was reversed, because you had a position of influence all of a sudden, where people were desperate for you to serve them a drink, or give them a good time or whatever. So people respected you more, I guess, as a consequence to it. But I realized at that point in time that gave me the confidence to know that I can speak to people. And sometimes when you go for a job, it's not about the technical knowledge. It's just about how you are as a person and how you are as a leader of a team. It's like I say, it gets you there. What gets you there won't get you to the next place. Hopefully that answers your question, Karen.
And really utilising the subject matter experts you've got in that field, isn't it? And
Yeah,
back to
absolutely.
the empowerment piece.
One of the things I learned a long time ago, Claire, is that I am not a civil engineer or a mechanical engineer, or anything else like that. So I made sure I had the best people I could possibly get around me. I'm doing the keynote at the IMechE dinner on Thursday night. I think they're going to have an absolute hairy when they realise they've invited a QS along to do that.
So next we have Michelle. Right. No crying for this one. Thank you, Steve. Inspirational as always. As someone who remembers you, how you made me feel and support you, the support you continue to give me, don't ever stop being you. Your influence in Scotland and the wider sector will make a difference that we need in changing the way we think and view the world. I love the point about water being AI proof. So how do we communicate that those teenagers making their career decisions over the next few years?
Firstly, Michelle, thank you very much for your kind words. It's very appreciative, and I know you've had some real challenges over the last couple of years, and I'm looking forward to seeing you flourish in the future. It's a great question. I mean, my natural reaction would be to say, "Oh, I could be a TikTok dad or something like that," and start doing, like, loads of daft videos around this sort of thing. But I'm probably the wrong person to ask that question. I think I would ask people who are more connected to early careers people and to younger people. And actually, it doesn't always have to be about teenagers and young people coming into the industry. How do we encourage people from other sectors to make the jump? We've got an apprentice who's 42, started with us in RSE. And me personally, I made this jump into it when I was in my 20s. So, I mean, it's really just about how you connect. And I would reach out to, like, IWA young professionals, IOW young professionals, and say, look, how do you connect with people? It's like dad mansplaining, I guess, or another way to young people. I don't know what the word is for that, but I'm probably the wrong person. I'd reach out and say, oh, find somebody who knows what they're doing. It's not me.
I think I've got a 14-year-old daughter, and while she lives on her mobile phone, her career choices around people. So I think going on your point, leading by example, she understands that people connection is really important. And actually, maybe the fact that she's lived on her mobile phone for so long has actually meant that she doesn't probably
Yeah.
want something that's computer
Do,
based in the future.
do you know something, Claire? One of the emerging themes I see a lot over the last few years is purpose. And I think where water can succeed is by that environmental and sustainable purpose. I think young people are much more wise to the world than we give them credit for in terms of, the challenges we face, whether it be environmental, societal. And so I'd put my trust in them to do that, So yeah, I think that purpose is a real driver.
We've got two questions left. We might just be able to squeeze them in. Um, David says, "Thank you very much, Stephen. Motivating and inspiring indeed. Please, how did you manage work and family life? Looking back, what would you have done differently?"
But I'll be really honest with you, David. I felt in the up until about 3 or 4 years ago, I felt I'd done a pretty good job of being at home, being there for the important life moments. And I guess at the time, I probably didn't realize the importance of those life moments to my children because growing up the way I did, I hate birthdays, for example, primarily because I never really celebrated them when I was young. And so I just was like, what's all the fuss about? Where my wife, on the other hand, she loves birthdays. She loves any excuse for a party and a celebration and bringing people together. And so up until that point, I felt I'd done like a pretty reasonable job of getting the balance right. But I think I did that because I was very, very clear on my value set that I wouldn't compromise on. So that's one of the reasons why I probably stayed at Galliford Try as long as I did as well. Is it was a great place for me to be at home most nights, and they were really happy with the way I did my business and things like that. They got the best out of us for that, and as a consequence, they got the best out of me because a happy home often equals happy work, and there's a massive symbiotic relationship between the two. Um, I think what is challenging to that is over the last few years, that's become harder to do. And I guess selfishly, when I started my career, got into some sort of more senior leadership positions, when I took the MD role at Galliford Try, and I had to start traveling around the UK a bit more, and I like to see people. I mean, this forum is a great way of connecting and speaking to people, but there's no substitute, as Claire said before, for human connection. Going for a coffee, having a chat. Body language, super important. Um, and then COVID, that was coupled with coming out of COVID and everything else as well. And I'll be really honest with you, David, the last 18 months has been super difficult. More for my family because they're getting used to me not being around as often, and I'm gallivanting around the bloody world or going out and speaking to people more often. And when I took this job on, I said to my wife, "Look, I'm maybe going to be away 2 or 3 nights a week." Sometimes it's been more than that. And actually, David, I haven't made my peace with this yet. I still need to find a way of getting a better balance between where we are in our family circumstances just now and where will be in the future, where my career is. And, I'm really grateful to my wife actually for being, at home a lot and supporting the children growing up, which has allowed me to, go and, achieve the success that I have. But I wouldn't have been able to do any of it at all without having that my wife there with me and my children. I would have been nothing. So we're doing it differently. I'm still learning about it, do it differently. If I'm being honest with you, David, I still have a lot to learn. I think if I felt that I would got it right now, I think my wife would kick me in the in the lower regions. Um, and so yeah, but I'm still learning.
So, and the very last question is more water-based related. So Gerald asks, what's the biggest challenge facing the water industry in the immediate future? Is it tightening of regulations, climate change, cost of materials,
Yeah.
or is it a mixture of all of them?
Do you know what? I think there's two things I would say on that, Gerald. The first one is it is definitely a mixture of those things, like emerging contaminants, climate change, population growth, all those sort of what I call maybe technical or things that are driven by regulatory challenges. But the other thing that sits alongside that is skills and people. And actually getting the right amount of people in, getting skills in, and getting a chance also to reset. I think the other thing is, we need to have an honest conversation with the public about the value of water because things like, say, phosphate concerns, climate change, cost, that's all around the value of water. And people, I mean, I was in Malawi in the summer, and the way that people value water there is just so humbling, and to the way that people value water here. And like in Scotland, people use 40% more water in Scotland than they do in Yorkshire, simply because they think they live in an island in the wettest part of the world, and it rains all the time. So why do I need to worry about water? It's like burning oil just for the sake of it. So yeah, I think the biggest challenges for me are getting skills, but the skills we need for the future. You look at the workforce. How do you replace the workforce as it starts to age? How do we bring new capability in to be able to do that? How do we stop having some of the people in the industry that have been here time memorial that are making decisions which are maybe not right for the entire industry? How do we do that? And Cunliffe's a great start, but it's incumbent on everyone. And IOW is a great organisation to try and help with that.
Thank you very much. As with all our webinars, we literally couldn't run them if it wasn't for hosts such as Stephen, but also our carefully selected and very grateful for our sponsors in the Eastern area. So this particular year we have 8 sponsors. We've got Clancy, Merit Skills, Windmill Insight Solutions, Anglian Water, RSE, hence Stephen's presence today, AC Contracting, Claret and Kia. So thank you very much to everyone who's come. Stephen is amazing on LinkedIn, so do link up and see his adventures around the
You're more
world.
than welcome to connect, but be prepared for LinkedIn spam, I'm afraid, because I just load of rubbish.
And if you haven't seen enough of Stephen, do sign up for our Eastern area ball in the spring. RSE are very kindly sponsoring our ball for us, and Stephen and some of the team from RSE will be in attendance. So get your glad rags on the 21st of March and come and join us and have a bit of a dance and a nice social connection. So thank you
That'd be
ever
great
so
to see
much,
you all.
and we'll see you all again soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Have a lovely rest of your day.